Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see a few faces in the crowd. Thank you for coming. My name is Janet Harrop. I'm the president of the Centre Wellington Chamber of Commerce. I would like to welcome everyone to our second annual municipal town hall meeting, an opportunity to hear directly from municipal township staff and ask some questions. Presentations will be made first, and then we'll take questions from the audience. You received, there was a bunch of notepads by where Roberta's standing, pads and pens. And if you have any questions during the speakers, if you want to just jot down a couple notes for the questions. I just ask that you turn off your cell phones, just for the courtesy of everybody. I always forget that, so I'm glad to be reminded. There's also a washroom in the lobby, and there is some water, bottled water, up in the lobby as well if anyone's interested. Over the past year, the Business and Government Affairs Committee of the Chamber has met with different members from the municipality, and from some of those meetings, we found that an event such as this was what members were looking for in order to get information. The Chamber is always looking at ways to bring value to members and membership and businesses within the community and the municipality. We're delighted to have members of our Township senior management team here tonight, and we would welcome our first speaker, Andy Goldie, Chief Administrative Officer.
Oh, I paid you more than that. Come on. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for attending tonight. I know it's a beautiful night out there, so we all probably want to get out and get on the trails or walk about. So we'll try to go through this relatively quickly for you. Like Janet said, we'd be happy to answer any questions afterwards. And if you don't want to answer them in a public forum, then we'll be sticking around for a little bit if you want to have individual conversations as well. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to our speakers. To start off with, we have Colin Baker, our new Managing Director of Infrastructure, and he's only got about 2 more months of new, and then he's going to be the old guy being here over a year. Brian Detzer, our new Managing Director of Community Services, and he's very new. He's only been here for a couple months now. Next to Brian is Wes Schnarr, who most of you already know, our Chief Financial Officer. Wes has been here for some time and probably outdates all of us on this role here. So Wes is going to talk to us about development charges. And then at the far end is Brett Salmon, our Managing Director of Planning and Development. And I got to make sure I say that planning and development, right, Brett? That's what we got to call. So as part of the agenda, Mike, I just hit the green. Okay. So tonight we a few items that we're all going to speak to: planning and growth, finance, some of the community services projects, as well as the infrastructure and asset management. And I thought I'd just start with a quick introduction about our new corporate structure. With regards to council just approved a new structure back in December. This is the old structure where we had a CAO reporting directly to the mayor and council. And we had 11 direct reports to the CAO. So that was a very large team, very individualized. We had a lot of silos and working kind of not hand in hand. So it was really a kind of disjointed part of the organization. So we worked for about the last year and a half looking at ways to better become more effective and efficient and provide better customer service to our residents as well as to our businesses. So in December, council approved a new structure whereby we have mayor and council and myself interacting and dialoguing with 5 direct reports. And so we have the manager of human resources, Rick Hulley, directly reports to me. He looks after all our human resources, our staff negotiations and things of that nature, health and safety, risk management, things of that nature with regards to our well-being of our employees. Then we have Colin as our new Managing Director of Infrastructure, and that includes a whole variety of areas, which I'll talk to in a couple of slides. Managing Director of Community Services, Managing Director of Corporate Services, and we currently have that posted internally within our organization. We hope to have that in place early in July. And then our Managing Director of Planning and Development. So with regards to infrastructure, it's similar to the old Public Works Department with regards to water supply and distribution, which, as we all know, is a huge part of new legislation coming out of Walkerton, and there's new things that we continuously have to look after. Colin's currently working, making a presentation tomorrow at the GRCA with regards to source water protection, which is another level of new legislation that we're being mandated to protect our source water across the region. Wastewater collection and treatment, and Colin will speak a little bit more about that with our expansion of the lower wastewater treatment plant this year. Roads, transportation, and traffic, as well as our engineering services, reviewing development drawings, looking at all our infrastructure and engineering services from there. Equipment maintenance for all our roads equipment, as well as cemetery operations. And that shared responsibility between the clerk's department and our infrastructure. Administration's being looked after for our cemeteries within our clerks, and all the registrations and working with our various business partners that provide those services. And then Colin's group guys get to look after the actual operations and the burials on site. Our Community Services Department looks after our parks and open space operations, so our parks, trails, infrastructure, horticulture, and our downtowns. Recreation facilities operations, so Sportsplex, Lower Community Center, this facility are all within our community services. Fire services now with reports in through our fire services. And just a bit of a personal background with regards to Brian. Brian has actually been a volunteer firefighter over in Woolwich for the last 20 years, so he brings lots of experience and be able to help manage with our fire services area. Fergus Grand Theatre that we're in here now, and fortunately we were talking earlier about trying to bring this event a little bit earlier in the season so that we're not competing against the nice summer nights. But the good news is this facility is so busy, it's hard to get us in early in the season, so that's a good news stories about how the theatre has kind of, there's Carrie celebrating in the back. So she's done a great job of getting a lot more activity and a lot more events. And I believe the last time we took a report to council, 3 or 4 years ago, we were at 25% of the revenues we're paying for the operation. And now we're above 52% of our revenues paying for the operation in this facility. So that's a huge jump in the last few years. Tourism and special events. So Deb and all her crew, and a number of them are in the crowd tonight, and they just finished the meeting chatting about blending within our community services area. And I'm having to look over at the podium. Volunteer coordination. So we have a lot of volunteers, not only in this part of the facility at the theater, but at our senior center and a lot of different events that we have a lot of volunteer coordination that we help manage. And that's something we're going to have to be really looking at from a risk management piece. Of volunteers in our organization through WSIB and through liabilities are looked as employees of how we treat them. So we have to make sure we're on top of that throughout the year. And then our park planning, so working through with developers and looking at updating some of our parks. And Brian's going to talk to a couple of those projects tonight as well. Our corporate services, so that's really taking our internal corporate area, our finance, our information technology, our legislative services, our customer service support, as well as our administration and our support for council, and wrapping it all together so that those are departments that typically serve the operational needs of our organization. So we've pulled them all together, and they'll be working to help support the operational ends of our operations. Planning and development. So we've now combined the land use planning that Brett was in charge of, the official plans and zoning, now with our building and services, so all the permits, building permits, zoning regulations, and our standard bylaws. So that's now all within our planning development, as well as our economic development. So we have separated tourism from economic development so that we have a focus on our business as well as a focus on our tourism and separating those two areas. They will be working in the background together, but we want to ensure that we're able to meet our business community needs as we go through the process and their support that we need to provide them. GIS, as well as our growth strategy, and Brett's going to talk to you a little about that a little later this evening. And finally, our human resources, so it's our employee performance, pay equity, job evaluation, our labor relations. We're not a unionized office, but we do have an employee group that represents the employees that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Health and safety, and obviously recruitment, and something that we're getting a lot more involved in is our succession planning about who do we need to train and build to move through the organization to help be here to help run the organization in the future. So I just wanted to briefly highlight some of the key things within our regards to our budget from 2012 and 2013. We have gone through some downsizing in the organization. As part of the 2012 budget, Council did look for a reduction of $300,000. And although it was a reduction in operating budget that was then put into our capital budget because to look back at how do we improve financing looking at our major projects. So it came out of our operating and put into our infrastructure because we need to fund that in a more substantial basis for our bridges and roads and parks and things of that nature. So we did reduce our staffing by about 1.5 full-time positions, one full-time position in building and a half-time position in clerks. We also reallocated some funding with regards to a staffing position in the Collins area that was funded out of the operating budget and really provide services to our user pay budget, being our water and wastewater services. So we've reallocated part of that salary to that area as well. Obviously, we're seeing an increased demand in building permits and revenue streams for that, so we've increased that slightly. And then finally, there's about $100,000 in cost savings across the organization from the various departments. And those are from reduction in hours of some of our part-time staff, as well as reductions in various different line operation budgets. So it's a $300,000 reduction overall in our operating budget. And one of the key things with that is it was not just a one-time thing that we did in 2012. The mandate of council and staff working together was that was a sustainable reduction in our operating budget moving forward year after year. So these are not items that you're going to be seeing coming back and looking for us coming back and say, well, we suffered for a couple of years, now we need them back. These are long-term commitments within our operating budget. A few things we've also taken an opportunity with some staff retiring as well as some movement in the organization is redeveloping some of our positions to better meet the service needs of our community. We have just hired a new planner that will be starting with us July 2nd, I believe, Brett. And we're excited about that. She brings with her a heritage certificate as well and has a really good understanding of the Heritage Planning Act. So she'll be starting in July. Being since now Brett's the managing director, we needed support to look after the planning area of it. We've restructured the director of building into a supervisory role and a chief building official. So we're actually down now one building official as compared to before, as well as a reduction in our department head levels from there. We've also retweaked our horticulturist position to a horticulturist and urban forestry because that's becoming more and more demand with the urban forestry. And as you all probably read about in the paper, our emerald ash borer is becoming a pretty significant impact to our forest. And just last week, Guelph announced that they now have clearly identified emerald ash borer in the south end of the city of Guelph. So it's just moving its way across from the southwestern Ontario. We're all going to be affected, and we need to look at strategies of how we deal with that. And that's why we've made sure we've hired someone that has those backgrounds. Collins has a new engineering technologist for water and wastewater, so we can better plan for that. There's lots more legislation in that area, so there's lots more demands about making sure we keep through those processes. And then one of the key things that I think is really exciting is our shared county positions that we're sharing between county as well as the other 6 other municipalities. This is where the county is actually funding the employee. They are Centre Wellington employees. We manage and oversee them, and then they provide services to all the 7 municipalities across the county. So this is where various different levels of government are trying to work together to be cost effective and not having to have each municipality funding that. We're working together. And so we currently have a fire training officer that services all the county, and that report, an annual report, just came to council last week. We have a risk management officer that Colin's working on with the county, and we hope to have that out sometime early July. And this is to deal with all the implementation of the Walkerton results and source water protection that Colin's presenting at the GRCA tomorrow. So again, a regional look at that from across the township and as well as the county. And then finally, Brian and Brad are looking at a fire prevention officer to provide, again, more legislation coming down through the Fire Act of looking at how do we provide fire prevention services across the county and looking at training of how we can get the word out to fire prevention throughout our communities. So that's all I'm going to talk about. Brett's going to come up next with regards to some of the planning development, and like I say, at the end, we'd be happy to answer any questions.